November 26, 1941. 31 ships of the Imperial Japanese Navy's First Air Fleet moved silently through the gray waters of the North Pacific, 200 miles northwest of the Hawaiian Islands. In the navigation room of the flagship carrier Akagi, Commander Minoru Genda studied weather reports and radio intercepts that confirmed what many in the Japanese Naval General Staff had declared impossible. The strike force had successfully crossed 3,000 miles of empty ocean without detection, guided by navigation techniques that senior officers had dismissed as foolhardy and unreliable. What Genda and his fellow navigators had accomplished violated every principle of safe ocean navigation taught at the Imperial Naval Academy. They had deliberately chosen routes through the stormiest sections of the North Pacific during winter months. They had maintained absolute radio silence for over a week, preventing position fixes from shore-based stations. Most controversially, they had relied on celestial navigation methods that many experienced officers considered outdated and dangerous for large fleet operations. Yet in 72 hours, this supposedly foolish navigation would guide over 300 Japanese aircraft to the most successful surprise attack in naval history. The story of how Japanese navigators found Pearl Harbor doesn't begin with the attack itself. It begins with a fundamental disagreement within the Imperial Navy about the role of navigation in modern warfare, the bitter rivalry between traditionalist and modernist factions, and one man's obsession with proving that ancient seafaring skills remained relevant in an age of radio beacons and electronic aids. To understand why the Pearl Harbor navigation represented such a remarkable achievement, you must first understand the institutional forces that nearly prevented it from happening. In 1938, when Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto first proposed a surprise attack against the American Pacific Fleet, Imperial Navy headquarters dismissed the concept as operationally impossible. The distances involved exceeded anything attempted in naval history. Hawaii lay over 3,000 miles from the nearest Japanese naval bases. No fleet had ever sustained operations at such range without intermediate supply points. Most critically, navigation accuracy required for surprise attack exceeded the capabilities of existing Japanese equipment and training. Traditional Japanese naval doctrine emphasized coastal operations and short-range fleet actions in the Western Pacific. Navigation training focused on familiar waters around the Japanese home islands and Chinese coast. Officers learned to rely on established shipping lanes, coastal landmarks, and radio navigation aids installed by the Imperial Navy throughout the Western Pacific. The concept of long-range ocean navigation using only celestial techniques had been largely abandoned, as modern technology provided safer alternatives. Commander Minoru Genda represented a different perspective within the Japanese Navy. Born January 16, 1894, in Hiroshima Prefecture, Genda had joined the Imperial Navy as a midshipman in 1915 and specialized in naval aviation from its earliest development. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Genda maintained interests in traditional Japanese seamanship techniques that predated modern navigation technology. Genda's fascination with celestial navigation began during training cruises aboard sailing vessels still used for midshipman instruction. These ships operated without radio equipment or electronic aids, forcing cadets to master traditional techniques using sextants, chronometers, and astronomical calculations. Most officers considered this training an antiquated formality, but Genda recognized the potential military value of navigation methods that required no external support or electronic emissions. During the 1920s and 30s, as the Imperial Navy modernized its equipment and procedures, Genda quietly continued studying traditional navigation techniques. He collected historical accounts of long-distance voyages by Japanese fishermen and merchants who had crossed the Pacific using only celestial observations. These accounts described navigation methods that achieved remarkable accuracy over distances that modern naval officers considered impossible without radio aids. The theoretical foundation for Genda's navigation philosophy came from studying the voyages of Japanese fishing fleets that regularly crossed the North Pacific to reach American and Canadian fishing grounds. These commercial vessels operated with minimal equipment and no government support, yet achieved navigation accuracy sufficient for reliable arrival at specific ports thousands of miles from Japan. Genda realized that similar techniques could potentially support military operations if properly adapted and systematized. When Admiral Yamamoto began serious planning for the Pearl Harbor attack in early 1941, navigation challenges emerged as the primary obstacle to success. Intelligence estimates indicated that American patrol aircraft operated up to 600 miles from Hawaiian bases. This meant the Japanese fleet would have to approach undetected through a window barely 200 miles wide, requiring navigation accuracy unprecedented in naval history. Conventional wisdom suggested that radio navigation aids would be essential for such precision. Japanese naval bases could establish radio beacons to guide the fleet across the Pacific. Shore-based direction-finding stations could provide position fixes at regular intervals. Electronic aids would ensure accurate navigation regardless of weather conditions or celestial visibility. However, Yamamoto recognized that radio transmissions would compromise the essential element of surprise. American naval intelligence maintained extensive radio monitoring networks throughout the Pacific. Any radio transmissions from the Japanese fleet would immediately reveal its position and probable destination. Even coded communications could be detected and analyzed to determine fleet movements. The attack's success depended absolutely on maintaining radio silence until the moment of attack, which eliminated all conventional navigation aids. Genda proposed a radical alternative that shocked his superiors and divided the naval staff. The attack fleet would navigate using only traditional celestial techniques, refined through intensive training and preparation. No radio transmissions, no electronic aids, no external position fixes. The fleet would cross 3,000 miles of empty ocean using only the stars, sun, and moon for guidance, just as Japanese mariners had done for centuries before modern technology existed. The proposal faced immediate opposition from senior navigation officers who considered it impossibly dangerous. Fleet navigation required precision impossible to achieve using celestial methods. Weather conditions in the North Pacific during winter months frequently prevented celestial observations for days at a time. Navigation errors would disperse the fleet across hundreds of miles of ocean, making coordinated attack impossible. The risk of complete navigational failure and loss of the entire fleet was unacceptably high. Genda's response was characteristically thorough and systematic. He organized a series of test voyages using volunteer crews and obsolete warships to prove that celestial navigation could achieve the required accuracy. These experimental missions departed from remote Japanese naval bases and attempted to reach predetermined positions in the North Pacific using only traditional navigation methods. The results would either validate Genda's theories or confirm the skeptics' warnings. The first test voyage departed Kure Naval Base in February 1941 using the elderly cruiser Natori and a crew of volunteers. The ship's radio equipment was sealed, and its navigation team received only celestial instruments and traditional charts. The mission objective was to reach a specific position 500 miles northeast of the Bonin Islands and return without using any modern navigation aids. Weather conditions during the test proved exceptionally challenging. Cloud cover prevented celestial observations for 3 consecutive days, forcing the navigation team to rely on dead reckoning and estimated positions. When clear skies finally returned, the ship's calculated position proved accurate within 10 miles of the actual location. This remarkable precision using only traditional methods provided the first evidence that Genda's theories might be practical. Subsequent test voyages increased distances and complexity to simulate conditions expected during the actual Pearl Harbor mission. Ships departed Japanese ports and navigated to predetermined positions up to 1,000 miles away without radio contact or position fixes. Navigation teams learned to compensate for ocean currents, magnetic variations, and equipment limitations using techniques developed through repeated practice and analysis of errors. The most ambitious test occurred in September 1941, when the aircraft carrier Shokaku conducted a simulated attack approach against the Japanese home islands. The ship departed from a position equivalent to the planned Pearl Harbor departure point and navigated over 2,000 miles to launch a mock attack against targets near Tokyo Bay. The exercise proved that large naval vessels could maintain accurate navigation over extended distances without compromising operational security. These successful tests gradually convinced skeptical officers that celestial navigation might support the Pearl Harbor operation. However, significant technical and training challenges remained unsolved. The attack fleet would include over 30 ships of different types, each requiring individual navigation while maintaining formation integrity. The scale of coordination required exceeded anything attempted in previous test voyages. Genda addressed this challenge by developing a revolutionary navigation system that combined traditional celestial techniques with innovative communication methods. Rather than requiring each ship to navigate independently, the system designated specific vessels as navigation leaders responsible for determining the fleet's position and course. These lead navigators would communicate position data to other ships using carefully coded visual signals that revealed no information to potential observers. The navigation leader system required exceptional skill from the designated officers, who bore responsibility for guiding the entire fleet. Genda personally selected and trained 12 navigation specialists who would serve as leaders for different sections of the attack force. These officers underwent intensive training in celestial navigation, ocean current analysis, and magnetic compass correction techniques that few naval officers had mastered since the early days of steam navigation. Training for the Pearl Harbor navigation began in earnest during October 1941. The entire attack fleet conducted practice voyages throughout the Western Pacific, rehearsing the coordination and communication procedures that would be essential during the actual mission. Ships practiced maintaining formation without radio contact, following visual signals from navigation leaders, and conducting celestial observations under various weather conditions. The most critical aspect of training involved weather prediction and contingency planning. North Pacific weather patterns during winter months created unpredictable conditions that could prevent celestial navigation for extended periods. Navigation teams learned to recognize weather signs that indicated approaching storms, plan alternative routes when necessary, and maintain accurate dead reckoning when celestial observations became impossible. Genda also developed innovative techniques for improving celestial navigation accuracy beyond traditional methods. Multiple navigation teams aboard each lead ship conducted independent observations and calculations, then compared results to identify and correct errors. Specialized instruments calibrated for maximum accuracy replaced standard naval equipment. Most importantly, navigation teams trained to achieve consistency and reliability under the stress conditions expected during actual combat operations. The selection of the approach route itself represented one of Genda's most controversial decisions. Traditional naval planning would have chosen the most direct route from Japan to Hawaii, minimizing distance and exposure time. However, Genda deliberately selected a northern route through the most dangerous and isolated sections of the North Pacific, areas where weather conditions were harsh, but American patrol activity was minimal. This northern route, following approximately the 35th parallel north latitude, crossed some of the most challenging waters in the Pacific Ocean. Winter storms regularly produced waves exceeding 30 feet in height and sustained winds over 50 knots. Fog and cloud cover frequently prevented celestial observations for days at a time. Ice accumulation posed serious hazards to aircraft and deck equipment. Most naval officers considered these waters unsuitable for large fleet operations. Genda argued that these challenging conditions actually provided advantages that outweighed the risks. American patrol aircraft and naval vessels avoided the area during winter months due to extreme weather. Commercial shipping followed more southerly routes, reducing the possibility of accidental contact with neutral vessels. The harsh conditions would also provide additional concealment for the Japanese fleet while testing the navigation skills under maximum stress. On November 26, 1941, 31 ships of the First Air Fleet departed their secret assembly point in Hitokapu Bay, in the remote Kuril Islands. The fleet included 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 9 destroyers, and 8 tankers. Aboard these vessels, over 20,000 Japanese sailors and airmen began the most ambitious navigation challenge in naval history. The departure from Hitokapu Bay marked the beginning of absolute radio silence that would continue until the moment of attack. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commanding the strike force, ordered all radio transmitters sealed and guarded to prevent accidental emissions. Communication between ships was limited to carefully coded visual signals that revealed no tactical information. The fleet essentially disappeared from the electronic spectrum while crossing the most heavily monitored ocean in the world. Weather conditions during the first 3 days of the voyage exceeded even the pessimistic forecasts that had worried Japanese planners. A massive storm system covered most of the North Pacific, generating sustained winds over 60 knots and waves approaching 40 feet in height. Several destroyers suffered structural damage from heavy seas, and 2 tankers reported difficulty maintaining formation speed. The severe weather also prevented celestial navigation for 72 consecutive hours, forcing the fleet to rely entirely on dead reckoning and estimated positions. Navigation teams aboard the lead ships maintained careful records of course, speed, and drift estimates while waiting for clear skies that would permit accurate position fixes. The situation tested every aspect of Genda's planning and training. When clear weather finally returned on November 29th, the fleet's navigation teams conducted simultaneous celestial observations to determine their actual position. The results shocked even Genda and his supporters. Despite 3 days of severe weather and no external position fixes, the fleet's estimated position proved accurate within 12 miles of the actual location. Traditional navigation techniques had maintained remarkable precision under the most challenging conditions imaginable. This navigation success during the storm provided crucial validation of Genda's methods and boosted confidence throughout the fleet. Officers who had privately questioned the feasibility of celestial navigation now began to believe that the mission might actually succeed. The demonstration of navigation accuracy under extreme conditions convinced skeptics that proper training and preparation could overcome the limitations of traditional techniques. The approach to Hawaii required increasingly precise navigation as the fleet moved closer to American patrol areas. Intelligence estimates indicated that American reconnaissance aircraft conducted regular searches up to 600 miles from Pearl Harbor. Detection by even a single patrol plane would compromise the entire operation, requiring navigation accuracy sufficient to thread the fleet through a narrow corridor of unpatrolled ocean. Genda's navigation plan called for the fleet to approach Pearl Harbor from the northwest, taking advantage of a gap in American patrol patterns identified through months of intelligence analysis. This approach required the fleet to reach a specific position exactly 200 miles north of Oahu at dawn on December 7, 1941. The timing and positioning had to be precise enough to launch the attack at the optimal moment when American defenses were least alert. During the final approach, navigation teams conducted celestial observations every 2 hours to ensure maximum accuracy. Multiple ships confirmed each position, fix independently to eliminate errors. Course corrections were made incrementally to avoid dramatic changes that might affect other ships' navigation. The coordination required exceptional skill from navigation leaders who bore responsibility for over 20,000 lives, and the success of Japan's most ambitious military operation. American radio intelligence stations in Hawaii detected no transmissions from the approaching Japanese fleet. The radio silence that had complicated navigation actually provided perfect operational security. American commanders remained completely unaware that the largest carrier force in history was approaching their primary naval base. The supposedly foolish navigation techniques had achieved strategic surprise beyond Japanese planners' most optimistic expectations. On the evening of December 6, 1941, Admiral Nagumo received confirmation from his navigation officers that the fleet had reached the planned launch position exactly on schedule. 6 aircraft carriers positioned 200 miles north of Pearl Harbor prepared to launch over 300 aircraft in 2 massive attack waves. The navigation challenge that experts had declared impossible was complete. The Pearl Harbor attack achieved complete tactical and strategic surprise. American defenders detected the first Japanese aircraft only minutes before bombs began falling on Battleship Row. The Pacific Fleet suffered devastating losses, with 8 battleships sunk or severely damaged, 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers heavily damaged, and 188 aircraft destroyed. Japanese losses totaled only 29 aircraft and 5 midget submarines. The navigation success enabled the attack's devastating effectiveness. Precise positioning allowed Japanese aircraft to approach Pearl Harbor from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming American defenses. Accurate timing ensured that both attack waves arrived when American forces were least prepared. Most importantly, the undetected approach prevented any warning that might have allowed American ships to disperse or prepare defenses. Post-attack analysis revealed the full extent of Genda's navigation achievement. The Japanese fleet had crossed over 3,000 miles of empty ocean without radio contact, maintained formation integrity despite severe weather, and arrived at the intended position within 2 miles of the planned location. This navigation accuracy exceeded contemporary standards for ships equipped with the most advanced radio aids and electronic equipment. The success of traditional navigation techniques at Pearl Harbor influenced Japanese naval operations throughout the early war period. Similar methods supported the attacks on Wake Island, Guam, and the Philippines. Long-range carrier operations in the Indian Ocean relied on celestial navigation refined through the Pearl Harbor experience. Japanese submarine operations throughout the Pacific employed traditional navigation methods that prevented detection through radio emissions. However, the limitations of celestial navigation also became apparent as the war progressed. American radar technology increasingly detected Japanese forces regardless of radio silence. Allied cryptanalysis of Japanese naval codes compromised operational security more effectively than radio direction finding. Most critically, the precision required for successful celestial navigation exceeded the capabilities of hastily trained replacement crews, as experienced navigators were lost to combat attrition. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 demonstrated both the continued effectiveness and ultimate limitations of Genda's navigation philosophy. Japanese carrier forces successfully navigated to their intended positions using traditional methods and achieved initial surprise against American defenders. However, American code-breaking had revealed Japanese plans in advance, negating the advantages of navigation secrecy and allowing precise positioning of defending forces. Commander Minoru Genda survived the war and later served as a general officer in the Japan Air Self-Defense Force. He continued advocating for traditional navigation skills even as modern technology made such techniques apparently obsolete. Genda argued that over-reliance on electronic aids created vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit through jamming or deception, making backup capabilities essential for military operations. Modern analysis of the Pearl Harbor navigation has validated many of Genda's theoretical foundations. Computer modeling demonstrates that celestial navigation could indeed achieve the accuracy required for surprise attack under optimal conditions. However, the models also confirm that weather-related limitations made such accuracy highly dependent on favorable conditions that could not be guaranteed during actual operations. The Pearl Harbor navigation represented the culmination of traditional seafaring skills applied to modern naval warfare. Japanese navigators achieved unprecedented accuracy over unprecedented distances using techniques that predated electronic technology by centuries. Their success enabled the most devastating surprise attack in naval history and demonstrated that traditional skills retained military value even in the modern era. Contemporary navigation training programs include the Pearl Harbor operation as a case study in backup navigation capabilities. Military academies worldwide study Genda's methods as examples of how traditional skills can supplement modern technology during electronic warfare conditions. The emphasis on celestial navigation has decreased as satellite systems provide global coverage, but the underlying principles of self-reliant navigation remain relevant for military planning. The legacy of the Pearl Harbor navigation extends beyond military applications to civilian maritime operations. Long-distance sailing competitions still require celestial navigation skills for safety and regulatory compliance. Commercial shipping companies train officers in traditional navigation methods as backup for electronic systems. Ocean research vessels operating in remote areas maintain celestial navigation capabilities for emergency situations. Minoru Genda's navigation philosophy influenced Japanese naval operations throughout World War II and shaped post-war training programs that emphasized traditional skills alongside modern technology. His demonstration that supposedly obsolete techniques could achieve results impossible with conventional methods provided a model for innovative thinking that transcended specific technical applications. The Pearl Harbor attack succeeded because Japanese navigators proved that traditional skills, properly applied and systematically trained, could exceed the performance of modern alternatives under specific conditions. The navigation techniques that colleagues had dismissed as foolish guided the Imperial Navy's greatest victory and changed the course of world history. The ancient art of celestial navigation had found Pearl Harbor again with deadly precision. That's how the supposedly foolish navigation methods of Commander Minoru Genda and his fellow officers guided the Japanese First Air Fleet across 3,000 miles of empty ocean to achieve complete surprise against the American Pacific Fleet, proving that traditional skills could support modern warfare when applied with systematic preparation and exceptional execution.